Greetings, I'm Charles Finn, editor of High Desert Journal, and welcome to the second in our series we're calling In the Time of COVID, the type of video salon that we're hosting. Today we're going to be joined by three former poet laureates, Paulann Petersen, Sheryl Noethe, and Tami Haaland, as well as the current poet laureate of Oregon, Kim Stafford. All are dear friends of mine and past contributors to the journal and fantastic writers, quite obviously. A little bit about the journal before I bring them on. We are a literary fine arts magazine posted entirely online. And the idea behind the journal is that we want to try and shine a light on what we feel is a rather overlooked region of the country, the interior West, and the artists that live there and work there. It's our experience that most of the recognition goes to the coast, say people living in Seattle, Portland, Los Angeles, San Francisco. And sometimes folks in the interior West are overlooked, and they are producing absolutely wonderful, wonderful work. That said, we accept submissions from any artist or any writer who lives in the interior West, and they can be writing on any topic, and the subject can be absolutely anything. But if you lived outside the region, we request that you write about the region. So go online, you can see back issues at www.highdesertjournal.com. With that, what I'll do is I'll invite our guests in, and I think they have some readings lined up for us, as well as a little bit of a talk about just what everyone's going through these days and get a little insight into their lives and how they're coping too. And I hope, obviously, everyone out there is doing well and staying home, and sit back, pour yourself another of your favorite beverages, and enjoy. Okay, greetings, everyone. This is Charles Finn, and as I said, I'm the editor of High Desert Journal, and I have with us four of our most distinguished contributors. Give a wave as I introduce each one of you there. Sheryl Noethe is in Missoula, former poet laureate over there in Montana. Tami Haaland, also former poet laureate, Montana. Paulann Petersen is former poet laureate in Oregon, and our current and reigning champion poet laureate in Oregon, Kim Stafford.
One more month.
One more month, really? And you're 10 years up.
That's right.
I didn't know that. Can you tell us who you're going to hand it off to?
They haven't told me. Paulann might know, but I don't know.
No, I don't know. No.
Okay, well. Kim, I think you had something you wanted to kick us off with, a bit of an invocation.
Yeah, in my 100 readings around the state, I realized I needed something to acknowledge the sovereign people of the place where I was. And so I've made this little blessing called All My Relations. I want to thank all my relations for this chance to be on earth in her time of flourishing, to thank the first people of this place, the Multnomah people, the Clackamas, Malala, Tualatin, and Chinook, to honor their sovereignty in long and continuing relation, still teaching us how we might be here together. I want to thank my mother and father, moon and sun, for setting me forth before their own passing on. To thank my grandmother who listened to me so eloquently, I learned to listen to my own heart and mind, to find stories and songs there. I want to thank my family and friends and all citizens and travelers who study and work for deeper kinship in this place with one another and with all creatures, one earth, visible, palpable, fragile, intricate, resonant, in need of our better stories. I want to thank you, listeners, who have gathered to receive what we have carried here, in hope that something we have may meet something you need, so all our relations will be strengthened for this life we live together. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Kim.
You know, I was doing a program up in Vancouver with Claudia Castro Luna, the poet laureate of Washington State, and there was an elder from the Cowlitz tribe. And she came up afterward and said, where did you get that phrase, all my relations? That's how we end all our meetings.
Yeah.
In fact, I signed my letters, AMR, all my relations.
Mm-hmm. If you've read Braiding Sweetgrass, have you read that book?
Yeah.
Yeah. Kimmerer, isn't that her last name, Barbara Kimmerer?
Yeah.
And she devotes a certain amount of time in that book to the wonderful long prayer and all my relations.
Yeah.
That of course includes so much more than the human relations that we usually think of.
Well, that's one thing poets do. Relation to place, to self, to generations, to people, to creatures.
To animals,
Yeah.
to trees, to plants. Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah, there was a line in there, Kim, in need of our better stories. And been talking with a lot of different people about the need for stories and the need for poetry right now. A lot of people during this time, they're sort of falling back onto then something that'll give them some comfort and ease, and at the very least a distraction. And all of you are storytellers through your poetry. You know, Tami, how are things going out there for you? And are you getting a lot of work done too? We were talking earlier before we started recording that some of us are getting even more work done than ever.
I'm feeling a lot more focused than I've felt in years. And I think part of that is, you know, just being in one place. When I think of a poem, I reach to the shelf. I don't have to worry about things being someplace else or forestalling the process because I have other obligations. I mean, I'm teaching, but still it's much more focused. So yes, I've been writing and I'm really happy about that process. I think for some of us, and there's a great deal of privilege involved in this, and I recognize that as well. You know, if we have a house, if we have one place to be, if we're not on the front lines, been told to stay home, and that suits our disposition, then there's a lot of privilege in that experience. And so I'm finding, yes, that I'm beginning to do the revisions I've needed to do, and some new work is coming, both prose and poetry, and I'm really pleased about that. If you'd like, I was just thinking that I have this new poem about a bat, and we were talking about all our relations, and a poem if you'd like.
Oh, of course, please.
Yeah.
Okay. This is called Bat at Noon. The swoop, skim, rise, and slip over water, almost bird-like, no coast, no glide. A gulp of insect and up the craggy cottonwood bark to a bat-sized crevice, perfect color in the shadowy daylight of late, late summer. We face each other. How good to meet you, I say. It clicks across the ragged bark into the space between us, quick pulses of sonar to map and find its prey. It is learning as I am. I see its vague contour, cannot see its skin, its slight fingers, the fine-veined texture of its wings. What allows me to feel how it huddles in the crevice, looking down? When I step away, it clicks again, and I return to this conversation, if it's a conversation. I see you, I say, then listen through moist summer heat for its barely audible reply.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure, thank you.
I love bats, not to eat them, but because they're so beautiful.
Yes.
when I was a kid, in about third or fourth grade, some boys on the playground were killing a bat with a stick. And,
Ooh,
you know, it scarred me for life. I can't forget it.
Yeah, it's terrible. Those images you can't let go of. I'm fascinated by the way we can come close to these creatures and find ways of, you know, at least acknowledging, at least calming, you know, drawing near, respecting, I guess, too.
mhm.
Yeah, I don't know if you had a chance to watch the first one of these we did with Bob Wrigley.
I haven't yet.
He's been writing a series of poems about, well, a few of them at least, where the animals are sort of curious, like, what's going on? Like,
Yeah.
where are all the humans?
Yeah.
And he's done a really, really fine job with a bunch of those.
In the Bronx Zoo, a tiger caught the virus from one of the workers, and a couple of the other big cats caught it. They say that they're recovering. That really knocked my socks off when they said the tiger had it now.
You know, I think we presume these kind of rigid
Species differentiation,
right? Yeah. We presume that we have distinction, and now we're learning so much about how connected we all are, humans and animals and the whole world.
Could I read you a poem?
Yes.
Love it.
That would be lovely.
It's called The Imagined Life, and I've gone back to the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Socrates, and Marcus Aurelius, I think it was, said, you cannot imagine an empty drawer. You have to create it in your mind. You cannot just imagine the void. You have to build it. So this is called The Imagined Life. 1, no explosions or gunfire, a quiet peace, the sound of the knot in a silk scarf loosening. 2, empty drawer with hidden images of soft things. 3, space traversed by the simple impetus of words, by the atoms of language, as though the imagination created a nerve fiber, something like jute, natural, durable, impermeable, strong enough to build a tent, slick as shark skin. It does not age or weaken. It does not have to obey natural law. No nuclear force can contain it. 4, so silent this morning I can hear the cat lapping water. 5, there is no end to the liberties nature takes with our minds.
Empty drawer. And what was it, the memory of soft things? Or
The hidden images of soft things.
Hidden images of soft things.
I mean, you think about opening a drawer and you just think of underwear. Well, maybe not everyone.
The poem, Sheryl, reminds me of a thing. There's a writer in Oregon named Gary Miranda, and he said one time, those who don't read or write poetry are spared the inconvenience of thought. And I think one thing a poem can do anytime, but certainly in these times, is to give us the oxygen of thought.
Yes.
Otherwise, we just reel from the news. And I tell my students the news is fine, but it doesn't tell the story. It just gives the kind of abrasive facts, statistics.
Right. Yeah. A good poem teaches us the art of attention, of, bringing our attention to what caught the poet's attention. And that's so wonderful. And on Facebook, phone conversations, even some notes coming through the USPS mail, I hear from friends that people are appreciating, are looking at so many small things in their lives that they perhaps, and I don't know if it's that they snubbed those things or turned their back on them, but somehow this isolation, this sequestering, opens up our attention and lets us appreciate many of those smaller things that perhaps we were not appreciating as much as we could before. So I just an hour ago, Kim, looked at the Oregon Live site on my computer to see the article that is there today. Isn't it new today? Yeah. About you and the poems that or some of the poems that you've been writing during this time of sequestering, and the story of how you go out to your, it's your little writing hut, is that what you call it? The shed. I knew I didn't have the right word. The writing shed that is about the size of Walden's, is that right?
Of Thoreau, yeah.
Of Thoreau's.
Once we got locked down, I made a vow. I'm going to write a pandemic poem every day, and I'm going to post it on Instagram and Facebook. And some reporter at the Oregonian, hungry for some good news, for some culture, for something other than dire statistics, started collecting his poems, and she's putting them out there.
And if anyone listening to this were to go just put Oregon Live into your browser, and it'll take you there, and Kim's name, and it'll take you there. Are there 7 poems? Am I right?
There's 7. That's right.
Yeah, 7 poems. And of course they are in print, and so sounds like a couple of wonderful photographers did some work to go with this.
They went out on my 5 a.m. walk with me.
Oh, well,
let me read one of the poems that they included there. It's called Oregon Dawn in Spite of the News.
Mm-hmm.
Before I can get to our statistics, so many stricken, so many dead, I'm summoned by the birds raising a ruckus outside. Crows and jays in festive outrage, trill, chirr, and aria from the little brown birds. The mournful dove, the querulous towhee, rusty starlings in their seesaw mutter, and a woodpecker hammering the gutter staccato. On the porch, I'm assaulted by the merciless scent of trees opening their million flowers, as I inhale the deep elixir of hazel, hawthorn, maple, and those shameless cherry trees. And just when I've almost recovered my serious moment, I gasp, helpless to see the full queen moon sidling down through a haze of blossoms.
Oh, and that merciless scent.
Yeah, well, this is such a strain to be locked down, surrounded, as Tami said, by trauma and tragedy for many.
Yes.
In the midst of spring.
It's
surreal. Beauty. It is really a surreal experience.
It is. Well, I will add this, when I was saying this idea of paying attention to small things that we might not see or pay the right kind of attention to. This is a little fairly recent poem about one of those ordinary things, Queen Anne's lace. Yeah. Roadside lace, gutter lace, such as an 18th century queen would never wear. That open work grown from any bit of dirt crammed into a cranny, crack in the asphalt, Chantilly. Marginal, scrub, carrot gone wild. By any other name, a weed. Each bloom is a domed cluster of tiny florets, snowflake globe shaken and unsettled nosegay of white stipple, scab lace, scruff tapped, mile after mile of field glory. The more than ordinary, again, is all too rare enough.
You know what I'm loving about this conversation is anyone listening, next time they see or hear about a bat, they'll pay attention.
Yes.
And people opening a drawer, Sheryl, they'll remember Marcus Aurelius
Yes.
in Queen Anne's lace will now be restored to its royal status in people's eyes. So, you know, that's a little thing, but I think it's an important thing to take us out of our fearing minds and look at the world again.
Right.
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it, Kim. I've always felt poetry in particular, you know, what we do is we often focus on something very ordinary and very tiny, but then you use that to show the universal, you know, something that touches to everyone, whether they have ever maybe, you know, they know what Queen Anne's lace is, or they've never really seen a bat except, you know, fluttering in the sky. But yeah, you take that and you make it universal for everyone.
You know, and another thing I think poetry does for us, particularly when you read across the centuries, is that you understand it's always been this way. You know, that people in previous generations have had these same kinds of focused experiences and have poetry. And I think that gives us some perspective. I mean, you know, we live in the present, we must live in the present, but right now the present can be anxiety producing. And so to understand that, you know, we're part of this very long continuum of humans and we're sharing experiences across these generations because of things like poetry. I think that, I find that calming.
Yeah. I love the moment in Sheryl in your TED talk where you talked about as a young child reading Dorothy Parker. And, you know, suddenly here's a character in a story worse than you. And you feel not so alone. You feel accompanied, you feel interested. In a way, it's just you know, like a flower opening. A poem helps a person open and, you know, be in the world again instead of being curled in a fetal position, suffering. To open up and connect and be with others, be in relation.
As opposed to laying in the fetal position in front of the TV watching Oprah and Dr. Phil and weeping intermittently.
Yes, that's right. You know, well, what you were saying, Paulann, about ordinary things made visible and ultimately kind of sacred. I thought of a phrase the other day, a poem for the ages. And I thought, well, I want to write a poem for today. I want to write a poem for people now. I don't make a breakfast for the ages. I make breakfast. And in the same way, I want to make a poem now for the people near me and, you know, make it available, share it, put it out there.
I wonder if there's any other way. I mean, isn't that what we do, you know? And yeah.
Well, sometimes, Tami, I've gone to a reading with people I admire very much, and it's as if the poem is being put forward as an artifact to be admired in the air like a jewel and its facets and so on. And I want to connect, you know, I want the poem to be like a cup of coffee you're handing to someone, and it's happening now.
I would love to hear more of your poems, actually.
Well, I have this one. This was one of my pandemic poems for a daughter in quarantine, and I should say she's not actually sick. but she's in lockdown in a basement apartment. So this was a poem I wrote for her one morning. For a daughter in quarantine. It's all so like a dream. As in my mind, I drive the empty streets to find you across the river, then east and north, all trees and wild blossom. In my mind, I descend the steps to your basement den with food, drink, music. We sit together, your stories and mine. I'm old, may catch it, be gone, or you, or both of us. It was always possible, but now we live in acceleration of the possible. I always wanted your independence, and now we have it. I here writing this, and you there in danger, brave. Child, girl, woman, it's okay. From far we live this day.
Mm.
She loved it.
Yeah, I bet she did. Is that for Rosemary?
That's for Rosie, yeah.
I would think so. I
Yeah,
would
yeah.
think so. That's lovely.
Tami, I'm wondering, you wrote that one about summer. You said it was a recent poem. Is your process to sort of sift back through memory, impressions? How do you do
Well,
that?
no, I think I'm just slow. I, and I tend not to let things out into the light of day until I feel like I've had a chance to rework them. And so, this is one that sort of finally landed. Yeah. I have others more recent, and one that seemed to deal with this time we're living in, but I haven't even had a chance to go back to it yet.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So I think I'm just slower. That's all.
Deliberate. Devoted.
Maybe.
Yeah.
How about you, Paulann? Same question that Kim
The
just.
same kind. Yeah. I have, but not to the extent that Kim has. And I've seen a number of the poems that you've been writing on Facebook.
Yeah.
And then also, I think actually the ones that the Oregonian printed, I had seen all of them before on Facebook and wondered at that and just been so inspired.
But Paulann,
Kim,
like Queen Anne's lace, was there a time you noticed Queen Anne's lace, or you thought of the phrase, or what launches a poem like that for you?
well, it is if you are out in especially out in a rural area or even in the city, any little crack or crevice will have Queen Anne's lace, and it is a weed, I guess.
Yeah.
But if you look at it, it is beautiful. And so it was just one of those ordinary things that seemed to me to be extraordinary. And in my own writing during this time, I have been essentially delving into some older journals and pulling things out. I have not been doing what you have been doing, which is going to the well each day and dipping down into that now, the pandemic, writing the pandemic poem every day.
Yeah. One thing I love is some poet named that weed. I mean, that's the magic of poetry, isn't it? To take a weed and give it a name like Queen Anne's lace.
Well, because it does look like the lace that you see paintings of her and the particular type of lace that women were wearing at that time. Yeah.
Well,
So,
Sheryl, when you were Poet Laureate, you did this series of podcasts, as I remember, to connect with students. How did you come up with a topic? Was it like an encounter with a student? Hey, I need to do session on that, or how did you
I
start
thought
those?
I thought it would be a good idea if I did a whole series of like 12 basic lessons and illustrated them. I had a whiteboard and I drew pictures, and so we did place, and we did the line break where you use your body to march along, and then line break, and then you
Yeah.
move the other way, and then line. And so
Yeah.
I had really a lot of fun, and it's on YouTube, and so I've offered the link to my teachers. I've been teaching 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and so I've offered it to them for the kids. But I'm telling you, when I walk into a school and I get 90 3rd graders bombing me and hugging me, and it's like
You're a celebrity.
it's the love. I miss them so much.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Those little faces and hands, and oh, they make my life beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, lovely. Well, Charles, I want to ask you, a high desert journal. You know, one thing about the desert is sometimes it's a long way to the oasis, but when you find a little pond or a stream, or you know, the poetry, it seems like there's something there about living in a hard time, seeking nourishment. How do you see the High Desert Journal resonating with this time?
Well, the reason that I started to do some of these is I was simply inspired by particularly musicians started putting on free house concerts and things, and then I did see a reading that you did. I don't know if it was associated with Fish Trap or not. You posted a poem. Some other writers were starting the same thing, and it just seemed that everyone wanted to do something, and all we could do was stay home. Right. That was the most, and it was such a passive thing. It didn't feel like we were really helping out. And it occurred to me, well, I have this, cadre of just top flight writers that I've been in contact with over all these years. And why not get them together to share some of their stories and words? And that could be a way that, I could facilitate and actually do something, positive and put that out there for people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really happy that I was in a position to do, and at least that, and more than simply, make a podcast and read some of my work, which would feel rather self-indulgent.
Yeah.
This way,
I'm hoping, as well as enjoying the poems in our conversation, maybe listeners to this program would think, "Hey, I want to do that."
Yeah.
I want to put something out there. For example, tomorrow night I'm going to be on a thing called Artslandia. They have a happy hour every night with a different artist, with a musician or dancer or painter or poet, and you're encouraged to bring a libation. And they just provide this as a service, since so many artists are stuck at home, to put on a show and put it out there. And I think there could be many things like this happening.
Charles, I think that what you do with doing the podcast is also what poetry is about. It makes us less lonely.
Yeah.
It's I never cared for social media, but now Zoom because I can connect with people.
Yeah, we're converts.
Yeah, and across distance too. I think it's kind of redefining that some as well. I mean, I wonder what it's going to be like when all of this is done, what we're going to find necessary, what we're going to find unnecessary, what becomes irrelevant, what's possible.
One of my friends said, "Where is Grandma when we need her?" Because we're the old women that knew how to grow food and weave and can, and they could handle being in quarantine and isolated, and they'd make do.
Yep.
And I'm hoping some of the simpler values will prevail, but I don't know, with this culture's history, I'm afraid we're just going to leap back and go shopping in China again.
Well, Sheryl, one of my poems, I can't find it here, but I got thinking about I was raised on stories of the Great Depression, and they were heroic stories. They were
Yeah, they
positive
were.
stories about thrift and self-reliance and cooperation. And so in the poem that I can't find, I thought, we had the epidemic of 1918, and corresponding to the end of World War I, we went into excess, the Roaring Twenties. Then we had the crash. And that led to the Great Depression and a redefinition of this country and our values. Well, this time we have the epidemic and the crash at the same time. And I have the same question: are we going to go back? I thought of the last class I taught before we shut down. 15 people had to drive through rush hour traffic across Portland to get to a room. And the following week we met on Zoom, and one of them played her viola for us, and we all wept. That's never happened in class
Oh,
at the school. And maybe we won't drive to class. Maybe we'll find another way to do it. Who knows?
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although, don't you miss, Kim, don't you miss that? I mean, as wonderful it is to be here looking at you and
Yeah.
able to
Yeah, yeah.
talk with you and with Sheryl and with Tami
Oh,
and
sure.
with Charles, that physical presence.
I have a poem about that. It's called Spring Fever in Lockdown.
Okay.
School never looked so good. Even waiting for the bus in the rain, give it to me. No seat, I'll stand. I'll stumble at the turn, even fall in someone's lap. Anyone, okay? Touch, elbow, knee, shoulder. It's called being alive. The warning bell, music to my ears. Math, history, bio lab, love it. Backs of heads while teach gives a PowerPoint, beautiful. The hall at break, lockers slamming, everybody bumping into everybody. What's better than that? I mean, really, better than these walls, this window. Wish I was in class right now, staring out the window, wishing I was home.
I love the ending of that poem with all those of us who have taught in a classroom, a contained classroom with
Yeah.
kids who gazing at the clock to figure out how long they had before their class got out. Yeah.
I've had jobs like that where I gazed at the clock.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Tami, in Billings, are people getting out? Do you go out to the countryside, or are you supposed to just stay inside?
We can go nearby. Same in Missoula, right? I mean, we're not supposed to drive across the state, but we can go nearby. And I think a lot of us are just out a lot more. I mean, it's easy in some ways in Montana, right?
My
It's
neighbor.
real hard
It's
to
easy.
stay away from each other. So
People walk by our house, and I run out. Hey, how you doing? Nice to see you. And I'm starting to meet all the neighbors because we're all so happy to be alive together on the block in the town. It's just everyone is really friendly and caring.
Sounds very old-fashioned.
I live in Southwest Portland, the quadrant of Portland that Kim and Perrin live in. And lucky us, we're kind of backed into a little patch of forest. So there are huge Douglas firs and cedar trees right up near the house. So one of my, I guess I would call it a pandemic poem, is a poem of gratitude for being so close to these big, beautiful trees, that they're part of my life, our lives every day. This is called Residence. In the limb brush of, in the scruff and litter of, in the shade of, the aphid drip, the crow hostel, the warping bark of, in the squirrel swing, the resin liquor, the chartreuse light. In the wind moan, snow sag, sun slicing, sky model, in the rain routing of I live in the green shrine of trees.
Mm,
Mm,
Lucky.
beautiful.
green
I
shrine.
really, really like the repetition in that poem, the pattern you've created.
Mm. So are you in a part of Montana that is more plains, you know, more plateau or?
Are you talking to me or to Sheryl?
Yes, I'm sorry, Tammy, that you're,
Oh,
yeah.
I'm in the plains part.
Okay.
And we do have mountains about an hour away are the Beartooth Mountains.
Mm.
They're very high. They have the only tundra, some of the only tundra in the lower 48 states. So they're gorgeous.
Montana is astonishingly beautiful.
Yeah. But right where I am in Billings, we have what we call rim rocks, a kind of rugged cliff along the north side of the city. And so I find cliffs appear in my poems a lot because of that.
Mm-hmm.
That formation. In fact, I was up there climbing on them the other day and got up too high and then had to try to find a way down. And you can't just jump off anywhere. And but I was thinking about how that kind of engagement with the natural world, really causes you to be in the moment. You're sizing up all the time. You can't worry too far ahead. And eventually I found my way down and didn't break a leg or anything.
Well, there's also that great analogy of I climbed too high and now I'm not sure I'm going to get down. I'm not sure if it's safe, but we know we're going to climb as high again tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. And we learn to trust too. Like you trust yourself. Well, I'll find a way. I'll follow the deer path. They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, eventually.
A writer said to me recently something that now I'm totally in love with this whole concept. She said, I'm having a problem in my writing that I'm all excited about.
Yeah.
And I just love that. It's like
Yeah.
climbing too high. You get in a predicament in a story or a poem, and you're going to have to write your way out of it. And that's what we're here to do.
Yeah.
I'm excited about that problem.
I remember Grace Paley saying when I was at Stanford as a Stegner Fellow, she was there with the fiction workshop and she let me sit in on the fiction workshop. And she's saying nothing is going to happen until those two things brush up against each other and cause a spark. She says it's that friction, it's that difficulty. So Kim, the writer that you're talking about was having that marvelous difficulty.
Yeah, well, one thing that occurred to me is there's going to be a whole generation of novels that will begin when the lockdown came. I was with the ex-partner or the son's girlfriend or the conflict is built into these sequesterings with whoever you're with. It's got to work out.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say that is such a tried and true formula for fiction and poetry too. And that is, you take the characters and you put them in a space where they're locked into that space for a certain amount of time. Ship of Fools, whatever, you get them into that place and sequester them there and see what happens.
Shelter in place. Well, I want to hear poems from Sheryl and Tami.
I have one I was going to offer to throw at you.
Good.
It's called Waiting. Despite the sorrow and the hatred, today I was led to beautiful strangers. The planet yearns to find its one true love, tiger, great ape, elephant, child composed of ashes. Earth is a globe of water where meaning never freezes. Whatever we use to describe it is only equal to our tools of measure does not choose its form until we come looking for it. Unaware, we make constant interpretations with no vantage point in reality. It depends on what instruments we use relative to expectations. Replace the word is with seems. It's all a huge coincidence, subatomic smoke and mirrors. When the when the magician reaches into his hat, the rabbit complies or decides to be a dove, if that's what is expected. I've been, I have a hobby with quantum physics, and they talk about how our participation with the universe, of observing it, that the very act of our observing it causes the molecules to get excited, and then they become what we expect.
Ah, right.
I have a poem called How to Control the Universe, and it talks about you just got to get the right molecules excited and look at them and
coax them along. I think
that's like that story of Borges, that they found an encyclopedia in a library in Tennessee that described the world as it should be, not as it is. And this idea so took off that the encyclopedia soon shaped the world. Maybe that's what poets are trying to do. If I can describe it in the right, clear, attractive way, it will become so.
Here, here.
Tami, read us a poem, Tami.
Well, I will read a poem. I think about sometimes in poetry how we sort of, what happens in the imagination is as real as what happens in the external world. And, I think in many poems, there is not a distinction between the ideal and the real. At least I play with that a lot. Because I feel, for example, if any of us were going to write our autobiographies, right, the internal life takes up as much as any external details. Way more. It probably is more significant to us. This is a poem called Deer on Crazy Creek, and Crazy Creek is a place up in the Beartooth Mountains, up on the top on the plateau. And so it's set in this locale, and about midway through I start talking to a deer that's up there. Also a reference to Yellow Woman. Do you know that story by Leslie Marmon Silko of Yellow Woman?
Yes.
Yes, right. And she's going about her day doing these ordinary things, and this stranger rides up on a horse, and she gets on the horse, and they go up in the mountains, and the farther they go, she begins to realize that maybe he's not just a person. Maybe she's entering into this mythic kind of space. And anyway, I thought about that a lot when I was up there, so I made reference to that as well. Deer on Crazy Creek. Along the trail, I think how risky the venture, the signs that say don't go alone into bear country. I can see miles except in aspen. Walking uphill in sage, I think of Yellow Woman, of the stranger who finds her and takes her into another life. It's after that, after coming from a grove of trees, I climb on a huge split boulder and watch an ant navigate a forest of lichen. When I raise my eyes to the horizon, I see you, the way you hold your head, ambling along the trail, the sway of your body on this path made long before humans managed and mapped this place. You are doing what we do. Head down, step ahead, step ahead. When you look up and I begin to speak, you stop, deciding whether to bolt or continue, a turn for us both. I wonder, do your thoughts go to the bear at the edge of the mind, the long trail with golden butterflies on sage, flies that chase and bite? Do you understand what calls and calls again from an aspen horizon?
Mm,
Nice.
Beautiful.
thank
You know, I got a feeling you guys could probably go on for a couple more hours at the very
Yeah.
least. And I know Sheryl has to go out and howl at the moon because isn't it almost time for the Missoula howl, Sheryl?
8 o'clock my time. It's only 6:51 now. So I have a
We
lot.
have,
Okay,
What?
you got an
2 more
hour.
hours, Charles.
Tammy, have you
I'm
seen
happy
on,
to, happy.
I'm sorry,
No, go ahead. I'm happy to let you guys go on as long as you want.
the videos people have made of Missoula howling?
Hmm?
no, but we're howling too at 8
You
o'clock.
are.
Yes.
Oh, good.
They should make a video from space, like all of us.
Yeah, yeah. So what were you leading up to, Charles? You want me to go out and howl an hour early?
No. I had my time frame wrong. I thought it was time for you to go howl.
It's funny because everyone gathers at their doors
Mhm.
and then waits. And then at one point you hear somebody howl and then you start and then all of a sudden it's everywhere.
You know, I do
Cheryl,
that
have you written a
too.
poem about that?
Yeah.
I want it.
You do
I
what,
want your
Debbie?
poem. I want your poem about howling.
About howling.
And how is anyone, designated to start it, or does someone just
Some
begin?
brave soul.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like you don't want to be first. Your
We're alone.
voice, right? Or alone.
Yeah.
I love that. Just everyone waiting, and then someone just opens their throat and throws back their head and
Yeah.
howls. And then everyone does. Wonderful.
And the dogs all look at the humans like, what are you doing? But then they bark and howl too, but then they'll stop and look at us like, this is new.
Or maybe
Yeah.
they're saying, what took you so long?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably.
Cheryl, a 4th grader asked me one time, when we make animal noises, what do they think we're saying? I love that.
Blah, 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 blah. Probably.
Yeah. Probably.
So Tammy, what you were saying reminded me of a great Richard Hugo quote that Cheryl has in her TED Talk. If I got this right, you owe nothing to reality. You owe everything to the truth of your feelings.
Mhm.
Is that what Hugo said?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's one of the most, besides Dorothy Parker, one of the most freeing things I've ever read or heard.
Well, maybe that's one thing poets are doing, is honoring the interior, the invisible, the intuitive, so that other people have permission to honor that as well.
Mhm.
I think it was Mark Twain that said, there is no story the imagination doesn't already know. So I tried it on my 3rd graders and they said, oh, no, I don't think that's true. And I said, okay, you're alone at night, it's storming, you go down the basement and you hear a big noise down there. What is it? What does your monster look like? And they all knew what the monster looked like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I have a poem from a 3rd grader. This was 30 years ago. I was in a little school and I gave the assignment, what if you woke up and you were really old? You were just really old. And one of the kids said, you mean like 30? I said,
Yeah.
no, I'm talking about really, really old. And what would it be like? What would it sound like? What would it look like? And so this little girl, Vicki Lynn Smith, she didn't get the assignment right. She misunderstood, and so she wrote this exquisite poem, and it goes like this. It's called I Was Old. God woke up and he heard a dinosaur, and he said to myself, how come he am in the old day? How come? He don't know why, and then he came out of my graveyard and he died again, and he loved to die young, and the end. And I just got down on my knees. I thought, oh, if only I could aspire to that freedom of thought. And you can't correct the child who says, God said to myself.
Yeah.
Because maybe that's the way it really works.
And the end.
Yeah, and then there was this whole epidemic. Everyone wanted to end their poems and the end because it's
I
such a
would think so.
including me.
I'm gonna copy that down.
Yeah, copy that down. Well, Charles, I'm feeling we need to take pity on our listeners. They've got things to do, and we could go for hours. And maybe we'll do another round someday.
Yeah, no, that'd be wonderful. Yeah, I think we can wrap it up. This has been exceeded every expectation. You guys have just been fantastic. All the readings, everything. So just hats off to you. Thank you for obviously all you do, all you write. Every one of you just has such a big heart, and you've been so helpful for the journal over all these years. I just can't express enough gratitude.
We love you, Charles.
We love
Yeah.
you.
Thank you for the
Thank
invitation
you,
to
Charles.
be here.
Okay. All right. Yeah, just take care, everybody, and stay safe.
Bye.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.